It all began with laughter. To millions of fans around the world, Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong weren't just comedians, they were icons. The duo that turned marijuana jokes into millions of dollars, creating albums, films, and a cultural legacy that defined stoner comedy for generations. Cheech, the laid-back Mexican-American car mechanic, and Tommy, the spaced-out, bearded hippie, became household names. Their names became synonymous with cannabis culture long before legalization was even a distant dream. Watching them on screen, it seemed effortless. Two best friends riffing off each other, bringing pure joy and laughter to audiences everywhere. But behind the clouds of smoke, behind the laughter and applause, there was a story far darker and more complicated than anyone could have imagined. A story of creative tension, personal betrayal, financial battles, and the slow disintegration of one of Hollywood's most iconic partnerships. This is the story of Cheech and Chong, the untold truths, the struggles they endured, and the legacy they left behind. The year was 1968. Vancouver, British Columbia, a small comedy club in a city that had yet to become a comedy hotspot. It was here that an unlikely partnership began when Cheech Marin, who had fled the United States to avoid the Vietnam draft, met Tommy Chong, a Canadian musician and budding performer. When we first got together, it was electric, Chong recalled years later. We finished each other's sentences. It was like we had an unspoken language. You start a joke, and the other knows exactly where to take it. This chemistry was rare and immediate. Their early performances weren't just acts, they were extensions of their real personalities. They weren't performing a character, they were living it. Their friendship, genuine and raw, became the foundation of a comedic empire. By 1971, their debut comedy album, Cheech and Chong, was nominated for a Grammy. Their 1978 film Up in Smoke cost less than $2 million to produce and grossed over $100 million. It was a cultural phenomenon, the dawn of stoner comedy as we know it. Their success seemed unstoppable. Audiences adored them not just for their humor, but for their authenticity. They weren't pretending, they were rebels, countercultural icons living their lives in ways most people only dreamed of. But fame has a way of changing everything. By the early 1980s, the duo who had once been inseparable began to drift apart. It started subtly. The fun and spontaneity that had fueled their early work gave way to tension and unease. A sound engineer who worked on several of their albums recalled, in the early 70s, they were constantly riffing, constantly making each other laugh. By the time we recorded Get Out of My Room in 1985, they wouldn't even record their parts on the same day. The deterioration wasn't sudden, it was a slow poisoning of a partnership that had once seemed indestructible. Behind the cameras, Cheech and Chong could barely tolerate being in the same room. They performed flawlessly when the lights were on, but as soon as the scene wrapped, they retreated to opposite corners of the set. What the world saw as effortless camaraderie was, in reality, one of Hollywood's most convincing acts. The reasons for this unraveling were complex. Cheech felt trapped by the persona that had made him famous. The stoner character, once a source of joy, had become a cage. I felt like I had created something that was taking over my life, Cheech admitted in later interviews. Meanwhile, Tommy Chong was fully immersed in the lifestyle they celebrated. Cannabis and psychedelics weren't just tools for comedy, they were a way of life. This fundamental divergence created a growing chasm between the two men. Cheech became more business-minded, thinking about his future and the legacy he wanted to leave. Chong continued to embrace the counterculture fully, remaining deeply immersed in drugs and the persona that had made them famous. Their differences weren't just professional, they were personal, embedded in daily habits and worldviews. Creative differences were only one part of the problem. Financial disputes began to dominate their partnership. Their early contracts were informal, often based on handshake agreements, which worked when they were just starting out. But as money poured in, the cracks widened. Chong, who often directed and produced their films in addition to performing, believed he deserved a larger share of profits and more creative control. Cheech, on the other hand, argued that the brand had been built equally by both of them. Simple business discussions became battles for respect, recognition, and power. Even minor disagreements over billing or dialogue in a script became charged with emotion. By the mid-1980s, these disputes had reached a breaking point. Projects stalled. Studios grew wary of working with a duo that seemed increasingly unpredictable. Their partnership, once fueled by laughter and creativity, was now dominated by tension and resentment. Cheech decided to branch out on his own, taking roles in films like Born in East LA and television shows like Nash Bridges. He wanted to be taken seriously as an actor and filmmaker, moving beyond the stoner comedy that had defined him. For Chong, this was devastating. He felt abandoned, left behind by a partner who had once been his closest friend. While Cheech found success in mainstream entertainment, Chong's opportunities as a solo performer were more limited. The industry seemed to favor Cheech's versatility over Chong's countercultural persona, creating a painful imbalance in both careers. If Cheech's departure wasn't enough, Chong soon faced a far more severe challenge. In 2003, he became the target of a federal DEA operation called Operation Pipe Dreams, which aimed to crack down on the sale of drug paraphernalia. Chong's company, which sold bongs online, was raided, and he was sentenced to 9 months in federal prison. He forfeited $13,000 and served a year on probation. The irony was palpable. For decades, Chong had played the lovable stoner for laughs. Now he was facing real consequences for his association with cannabis. Many observers viewed the prosecution as politically motivated, an attempt to make an example out of a high-profile cannabis advocate. Chong's time in prison was transformative. He befriended other inmates, deepened his commitment to cannabis advocacy, and returned with renewed purpose. Yet, this chapter further widened the divide between him and Cheech, who continued thriving in mainstream entertainment. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. While their comedy celebrated cannabis as fun and harmless, the reality behind the scenes was more complicated, particularly for Chong. Sources recall that his drug use was extreme, sometimes interfering with professional commitments and collaboration. Cheech moderated his use as his responsibilities grew, while Chong remained fully immersed, creating practical challenges on set and in the studio. This divergence highlighted the duality of their legacy. Their work normalized cannabis for mainstream audiences, but their personal habits sometimes mirrored the darker consequences of substance use. What the audience found entertaining was behind the scenes, occasionally a cause for concern. After decades apart, Cheech and Chong reunited on stage in 2008, launching the Light Up America tour. For fans, it was a nostalgic dream, a chance to see the iconic duo together again. But behind the scenes, the reconciliation was pragmatic, not emotional. They had separate dressing rooms, separate transportation, and maintained a professional distance. On stage, they recreated their signature chemistry flawlessly. Off stage, however, they operated like business partners rather than old friends, their past tensions never fully resolved. The reunion was a reminder that time may soften some wounds, but it doesn't erase the past. Today, Cheech Marin is 77, and Tommy Chong is 85. Decades after their initial rise to fame, their story offers a powerful lens into the complexity of creative partnerships, the pressures of fame, and the enduring influence of counterculture. Their comedy shaped generations, helped normalize cannabis, and left a cultural imprint that remains significant. Yet their story also reveals the human realities behind the personas: friendship fractured by ambition, creativity, and lifestyle choices, the challenges of balancing business with personal relationships, and the costs of living a life in the public eye. For fans, Cheech and Chong remain symbols of joy, laughter, and rebellion. For those who know the full story, they are a testament to the resilience required to navigate life's highs and lows, on stage and off. Their legacy is paradoxical. A reminder that the magic of creativity can coexist with conflict, that humor can hide pain, and that even the closest partnerships can fracture under pressure, but can still leave an indelible mark on culture and history. Cheech and Chong didn't just make people laugh. They told a story of friendship, ambition, rebellion, and survival. And perhaps that's the most enduring joke of all. The laughter we see is only half the story. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it.